I took a seat in the interrogation room and waited for Rokshiki. In the meantime, I closed my eyes and stilled my heart. It's okay, Reiji. You've got this. Do you? Excuse me. I sure hope you do. Because like I said, the last time when you were in here with Masaki, you kind of fell for his tricks and punched him in the face. And that ended your interrogation. Just keep your cool no matter what this son of a bitch throws at you. Easier said than done. I had no idea how much he knew about the past incidents, but regardless, I couldn't let my guard down. The moment I let him get to me was the moment I lost. True. Suddenly the door opened, revealing the man himself under the watchful eye of a cop.
Oh yeah. 久しぶりですね.
Well, my, you're talkative today. Hiroshiki spoke up as soon as he saw me. I ignored him and gestured to the opposite chair. Letting him take the reins of the conversation simply wasn't an option. Hiroshiki took his seat, hands and feet still shackled.
相変わらずですね、この待遇は。それも仕方のないことかもしれませんが。
Hiroshiki was irritatingly loquacious. So much so, in fact, that you'd never believe this was the same guy who'd hardly said a word for the past 2 years.
聞きたいことがあります。
何かね。
Hiroshiki stared deep into my eyes like a cobra sizing up its prey.
遺体を装飾する殺人犯の心理状態について。
ほほ
う。Hiroshiki smirked.
そういう事件が起こっているのですか。
その必要はありません。
I responded as calmly as possible.
犯人の目星もついていないのによろしいのですか。
答える必要はありません。あなたが過去に行った死体装飾について。
そのようなこと、人それぞれではありませんか。その人の立場や相手との関係によって変化するものでしょう。
He was absolutely right.
時坂さん、あなたは心理分析の真似事をしたいようですね。しかし悲しいかな。この国ではまだその下地ができているとは言い難い。
どういうことですか。
Though I knew I was treading dangerous ground with him, I had no choice but to take the bait.
犯罪心理学は戦前よりこの国でも盛んに研究されています。しかし、サンプルとなる犯罪者の量が少ないのが現状です。
犯罪者ならばそこら中にいるでしょう。
Take the man I was staring at, for example.
心理分析するまでもない殺人犯は大勢いますね。しかし、行動科学的に分析するに値するものはそういません。
Roshi went on to cite cases such as the Sada Abe homicide, whose culprit violently murdered her lover, and the Tsuyama massacre, where the perpetrator gunned down 30 people in 90 minutes.
心理分析とは心理学ではありません。あくまで統計学。過去の犯罪者のデータを集め、
我々はその過去の犯罪者のデータを求めているんですよ。
If there was any criminal who required an analysis, it was Makuro Rokshiki himself.
わざわざ遺体を装飾するような人間。
There was another who'd killed under the guise of a curse, but she and her crimes didn't merit a proverbial dissection.
あなたが試してみてはいかがですか。百聞は一見にしかずと言いますし。
Now that was bait I couldn't take. Given that he was in the presence of a cop, he was just trying to avoid making any statements that could be interpreted as a confession.
ああ、そうだ。朽木塔子が見つかったそうですね。亡くなってしまったのは残念ですが。
No, Reiji, don't do it. Don't let him goad you. It's exactly what he wants.
そこまでだ、六式。
It was then that Yaginuma abruptly entered the room.
先輩も今日はこのくらいでいいですか。
So he was watching, was he?
ああ。
I'd been aware from the start that this was the game Hiroshiki would play. And yet, I'd been this close to snapping regardless.
僕はこのまま六式に話すことがあるので。
Yaginuma took my chair with those words. The sky through the barred window grew redder as we spoke. God damn it, Reiji, you idiot. Masaki returned to the agency after saying farewell to Reiji. By now it was evening. As such, he decided to go around the city as per his daily routine, even though I knew he'd probably bear no fruit like always. Goddamn right. Where are we going, baby? We're going to the motherfucking hospital. You're know we're going to the motherfucking hospital. Reception hours were already over by this point. Fortunately, though, visiting hours were still ongoing. Masuki went inside to find Humiya strolling his way from the other end of the corridor.
どうも先生。
いやどうかし
Humiya stopped in his tracks and cocked his head.
いや特に差し迫った用事はないんですが、
そうでしたか。
Humiya smiled.
お加減はどうです？
今のところ何の問題もありませんよ。
Masuki was being completely honest. He actually had been sleeping a lot better these days.
それはよかった。
先生方のおかげです。
Masuki bowed to Humiya.
いえいえ、我々ができることなんて限られていますよ。一番の薬は患者さんが自ら治すという気持ちですから。
そうかもしれませんね。
There could have very well been some truth to that, considering Watanuki, at least, hadn't prescribed him anything lately.
製薬会社の跡取りのあなたには薬について話すのは釈迦に説法かもしれませんね。
いえ、すでに感動された身ですから。それに僕の知識など門前の小僧以下のものですよ。
He'd left Hitogata before he could ever learn the tricks of the Hinagami pharmaceuticals trades, after all.
それは失礼しました。
Fumiya sincerely
気
apologized.
にしないでください。自分で望んだことですから。
僕は流されるまま医者になってしまいましたからね。あなたが羨ましいです。
Fumiya sighed. Masuki couldn't say anything to that. Alright, that just ends our time there at the hospital. Fumiya's like, man, I wish I could have disobeyed my family and done my own thing. Alright, well, great talking to you, Doc. Bye. Yukari flopped down on the sofa in her living room after sunset. Lying on the table before her was a handout they distributed at school earlier. The top read Career Aspirations. Now, there was still plenty of time before she had to turn it in. What's more, it wasn't like she had to follow the path she wrote about. Yet she couldn't bring herself to fill it out in spite of that. Joining the workforce seemed like the logical course of action, considering her family's situation and all. But Eiji made enough to feed them both. However, Yukari would need money if she wanted to pursue higher education. Though Reiji hadn't breathed a word about it, Yukari knew it must have cost him a pretty penny to send her to Oba Girls Academy. To the point that it was probably only a matter of time before he burned through their parents' whole inheritance, even. Yukari's head sank even lower. She couldn't talk to Reiji about this. Knowing her brother, he'd definitely tell her to put herself above him, after all. Suddenly, she heard the front door open. Speak of the devil. Yukari rose to her feet. She already made dinner ahead of time. However, Reiji entered the living room before she could reach the kitchen.
ただいま。
お帰りなさいませ、兄さん。お腹空いてらっしゃるでしょ？
ああ、いや、後でいい。
Reiji removed his coat and laid it across the back of the sofa with those words.
ちょっと調べ物があるから。
Just like that, he was off to their library. Yukari sighed and picked up his coat. She dusted it off and put it on a hanger so it wouldn't wrinkle. Lastly, she hung it on the gap at the top of Reiji's door. Once done, she started for the kitchen again, only to stop. She turned around and shot the door to the library a look. Reiji had been devoting every fiber of his being to work this month, from what she could tell. Still, he'd made such a wreck of himself right after finding her body that Yukari hadn't been able to even bear looking at him in the eye back then. As such, perhaps she should have taken comfort in the fact that he was back to his old self. However, he still came across as too keyed up, like he could break down at any second. Yukari knew nothing about the case he was working at the moment. That was exactly why she'd been praying with all her heart that he'd stop pushing himself so hard. She was aware her brother wasn't the type to let up, however. No, Reiji was like a runaway train that wouldn't stop so long as his current case was bringing pain and suffering to others. If the incidents Yukari had gotten involved with last month had taught her anything, it was that.
兄さん、夕飯をお持ちしました。
まあ、そこに置いておいてくれ。
Reiji gestured to a small table without even looking up from his book. She made him something relatively easy to eat, rice balls wrapped in seaweed. Furthermore, she also included rich pork miso soup to keep him awake. Last but not least, there was some pickled eggplant as well.
後でコーヒーをお持ちしますね。
ああ。
それでは、失礼します。
Yukari sighed after returning to the living room. She hadn't felt like she could so much as get a word in because of how focused Reiji had been. There's nothing I can do for him. Yukari was perfectly aware of that fact. which made the situation at hand all the more vexing. I ended up hunkering down in the library until nearly the crack of dawn, so you could had already left for school by the time I woke up. Once I was out and about, I boiled some water and brewed myself some tea. I took a deep breath after lounging against the sofa. Poring over criminal psychology and statistics texts all night long obviously hadn't done my health any favors. To be clear, I hadn't looked into them because of what Urokshiki had mentioned back at the interrogation room. It was strictly because I told myself I needed the information for future reference. That's all. Simple as that. But while I wasn't sure how much any of it would come in handy, I couldn't just sit around all day. The murderer wasn't going to wait for me to get an MA in criminology, after all. It was with that thought I leafed through the morning paper. There weren't any follow-up reports on the murders, thankfully. Then again, maybe I shouldn't have been grateful given my profession. Unfortunately, it wasn't like it served as a guarantee that there'd be no more victims. The killer would attack their victims, murder them, remodel their bodies, and only then dispose of them several days after the murder itself. So for all I knew, they could have already been working on their next piece of art even at this very moment. To make matters worse, there was nothing we could do to stop them if they really were just going after random women. Nothing except putting more beat cops on the street at night, really. Especially around Chofu and Huchu. That said, no one even knew if the murderer was operating out of either area. Would I be doing that if I were the killer? If so, maybe there's some reason they have to make use of that region. Yeah, see? Maybe there's a reason they have to. They have some kind of motive for doing so. Sasakura, prime suspect, was operating out of Kichijoji. He could have always taken buses to Chofu. It certainly was close enough that it wouldn't be a bother. There was a major flaw in this theory, however. The culprit must have been using a car to dispose of the bodies, but Sasakura didn't have one at his gallery from what I'd seen. Who there? Suddenly the doorbell rang. There she is. Doji? Fuyumi?
わざわざ来てもらってすまなかったな、当時。
気にするな。こちらに来るついでだ。
それなんだがな。どうやら警戒されているようで、会いには行けそうにない。
No, I didn't. Masaki did. Doji shook her head with exasperation. Much as I wanted to defend myself, blaming Masaki would have sounded like an excuse to her, so I didn't bother.
どうするつもりだ？
奴の周辺を調べてはくれているんだろ
う。まあな。奴の画廊が以前あった調布で聞き込みをしてきた。正木を出しに使わせてもらったが。
冤罪についての記事でも書くつもりか？
真面目な取材内容では真面目な答えしか返ってこないさ。ゴシップ誌のような内容であれば人の噂話だ。自然に口は軽くなる。
I mean, never to let her get any dirt on me.
それで当の画廊についてだがいろいろ聞けたぞ。
Well, that was surprising. Must have been doing too terribly for himself. He could afford to utilize his former workplace like that.
それと笹倉と前園のせいだがよく仲睦まじく商店街で買い物などもしていたようだ。
男女の仲ということか。
夫婦だと思っていた者もいるようだから可能性はあるな。
しかしそうなると笹倉が前園のせいを殺害したということに。
The more I learned, the more plausible it was sounding.
地上のもつれか。しかしそれでもあの遺体を加工したことにつながらないぞ。
She wasn't wrong. Plus also didn't clarify why he would have parlayed that into serial killing.
前園のせいを殺害し猟奇趣味に目覚めた。
Because it was her request. He was in love with her because she was an amazing artist. He has this high respect for the art, so he finds this like master artist, right? This master art restorer, and of course that in itself attracts him to her. They end up hooking up, and then like I don't know how deep their shit goes, but clearly one was madly in love with the other. She makes this final request like, hey, you gotta do this, and he's like, all right, I'ma fucking do it. Sometimes pussy just do that to a motherfucker, you know?
絵を見て目覚めたという可能性だってある。見に行ったと話しているのだろ
う。まず天罰ありきか。その方がしっくりくるな。
If that were the case, it would mean he became obsessed with the painting after seeing it, then killed Sei Maizono, his own girlfriend, possibly before remodeling her corpse.
その出来に納得がいかず別の女性を襲った。それならば最初の前園聖の遺体が自宅で発見されたことも特殊。
第一発見者を装ってか。しかし、ま
Yeah,
だ納得できない
the
点があ
paint
るぞ。
thinner.
分かってるさ。
Sasuke probably wouldn't have had any trouble acquiring paint thinner at all given his occupation. But he couldn't possibly have tricked Maizono into taking it, meaning
やはり自殺か。
死因だけを考えればそちらの方がより自然だ。
それを見つけた笹倉が遺体を加工した。
筋が通るからこそ何かが違うんだろうと思う
and leaned back into the sofa.
が。悪い。茶も出してなかったな。
構わないさ。
そうもいかねえよ。
Yukari would have my head if she learned what a bad host I'd been, and to someone I'd invited no less. Thus I got up and made a beeline for the kitchen. There I boiled water as I took out the tea leaves. It's time we stopped chasing groundless theories. Pretty much speculate whatever the hell you want as long as there's no evidence to the contrary. Actually, wait. There's one more theory we haven't gone over. One that specifically applies to when you don't have evidence.
笹倉が犯人ではない可能性も論じておかねばならないだろうな。
Uh-huh. Toji suddenly popped in. She must have heard me talking to myself.
例えば犯人が笹倉に罪をかぶせようとしていた場合はどうだ。
I brought the kettle into the living room and continued my train of thought.
何の意味が。いや、意味ならあるか。
あいにくと他に怪しい奴もいないから難しいが、捜査線上に上がっていればいいんだが。
いたら苦労はしていないだろうさ。あの管理官殿も。
She made a good point.
しかし、他に真犯人がいる説か。
Yeah, I know it is.
視野を狭めてしまうよりはいい。
I served a teacup full of coarse tea to Toji.
喉を湿らせてからだな。
そうだな。
Toji and I drank our tea in silence. Boy, if only we had some sponge cake to go with this.
真犯人は別として、前園聖の死はどうする。他殺か自殺か。それによって
Definitely a
考え方も変わ
suicide.
ると思うが。
Because they said there's like no signs of struggle, right? There's no signs of like assault.
そうだな。
Which angle should I focus on given all we know so far? Suicide.
自殺だと思うが、わざわざシンナーを飲むなんて苦しい死に方をする意味がわからない。
よほどの恨みや未練が残っていたりすると、あえてそういう方法を選ぶ場合があるとき。
恨みね。
Masuke had mentioned yesterday that Sei Maizono had exhibited no suicidal inclinations the last time they'd met. Sure, it wouldn't have been the first time he'd been blind to something staring him in the face, but still.
今までの流れで考えると、
Was she the kind of person who would have died just to rub something in another's face? Okay, so maybe there was some kind of dynamic between Sasakura and Sei, right? But maybe they weren't a lovey-dovey couple. Maybe one truly was obsessed with the other, but maybe it wasn't reciprocal, right? Okay, okay. So she died in a violent manner to send that message to Sasakura, but then her disciple, who she had trained to do some things, comes in and remodels her body because, for whatever reason, they wanted to die in a grotesque way. Ooh, back it up. Where the Hearth Grudge regrets chose to die as painfully as possible to send a message. Now we know that when Sasakura, or at least we can assume, right? Because we know when Stella said she saw the mad old man who saw Exile of Paradise. Sasakura, something about Exile of Paradise angered him. For whatever reason, it angered him. It made him mad. It upset him in some fashion, right? If I had to guess, mayhaps it's the fact that, because I assume that like maybe Sei had been the model for Exile of Paradise. I don't know if the timelines line up right for that or not. I think that's something that I had initially hypothesized. So imagine that was the case, and Sasakura feels betrayed by that, right? Now, if both Sasakura and Chie were at this exhibit, or whoever woman in coat is, like, we haven't had a strong lead as to woman in coat because we've kind of dropped that lead because Reiji's an idiot. But if woman in quote, I'm just gonna keep saying Chie, we're both there. Chie sees Sasakura's reaction to it, right? She sees Sasakura's there, she sees his reaction, she storms out, right? She goes running out the door. Maybe even an attempt to warn Sei, to tell Sei, like, hey, something's going to happen, right? He knows now, it's public knowledge, he recognized it, something's going to happen. And so, since Chie would have seen Exile of Paradise, she would have been there, she would have witnessed it herself, she would have had, like, didn't they say she had good photographic memory? Is that just a detail I know she was like a great artist, but is that a detail I'm just randomly attaching to her? Probably. But we know Chie is this phenomenal artist, practically a prodigy, right? So she does this, and see, that's why she wants to go abroad, right? That's why she wants to go to the States, right? No, she wants to go to like Italy. She wants to go somewhere. Sei went to the States, right? But Chie wants to go somewhere else, or maybe it's the other way around. Sei went somewhere else, Chie wants to go. Someone wants to go somewhere, all right? End of the road, someone wants to go somewhere. They want to leave the country, right? So now it makes sense. All of a sudden, Chie is like, yeah, no, I think I'm gonna go study abroad, go learn something in a different country, right? So the reason I bring all this up is because she said sending a message with their death. If Sei knew that Exile of Paradise would piss off Sasakura so much, right? And clearly Chie would have some inclination that it would do that as well, then whatever this dynamic was between Sei and Sasakura, it almost feels like it's like borderline possessive. Like he had some kind of blackmail on her that was forcing her to stay there, if I had to guess, right? So then she decides, I'm guessing there's some kind of altercation, right? There's some kind of altercation, and Sei fears that life, I don't know, for whatever reason, Sei decides this is the time she's going to end her life. So she has this like plan concocted with like her star pupil, right? Especially after winning like the big gold medal at her art contest, she has full, faith in this pupil, right? And that when she dies, her pupil then, who would have seen the painting, who was there, would have seen the painting, then models her body like the painting as an extra big fuck you to Sasakura. So like, this woman you've been obsessed with for so long is now, your last memory of seeing her will be as like the IRL version of this painting that angers you, that drives you fucking berserk, makes you enraged. Your final memory of that woman will forever be her posed as that painting, as like an extra big fuck you when she goes out. Now, as for why the killer has continued to do it, that's kind of the one thing that kind of evades me, that I can't quite put my finger on. Is like, that's got to be the reason, other than just like it was something that her mentor had asked her to do, right? Positioning, doing to Sei's body what she did, and maybe it could be what Reiji had been saying about Sasakura, right? Maybe they did it once and then realized they enjoyed it, right? So they kept doing it. Maybe that is the case. Very well could be. But I gotta feel like there's a reason she keeps targeting women from Chofu, right? I feel like there's gotta be a connection to the women in Chofu. The women in that area. There's gotta be a reason. Because even Sasakura mentioned, like, she was hanging with a group of people in Chofu. Now, did he lie about specifically what they were the reason they were hanging out with? Probably. But I do believe that she was hanging out with a group of people, and somehow that group of people is connected to the people who are dying nowadays. Ooh. Now what if? No. No. I need more time to cook with that one before I present it. But no, I think Toji's absolutely onto something. They're definitely, because that's the thing. She said people only give you serious answers when you come with serious questions. However, you pretend to be from a gossip magazine, people run their mouths. That doesn't necessarily mean they're giving you the full truth, but they're happy to run their mouth for a gossip magazine, right? It's just gossip. I said gossip isn't necessarily the truth. So like they said they were seen being intimate. So there was definitely a connection between them. I think I'm right in Sasakura was possessive of her and had something over her, right? Some kind of blackmail. I think Toji's got the nail on the head with wanting to make your death a big fuck you to the person who was, making your life hell. I see the vision. And like I said, Chie wanting to escape now, quote unquote escape, wanted to go abroad all of a sudden. Like, yeah, no, I think I'm gonna take up this option, this chance to go abroad and go study abroad. For no particular reason, just want to leave the country. No, I think I'm cooking something. Like Reiji said, Sasakura did not seem innocent. I don't think he's the culprit, but he does not seem innocent. I very much believe there might have been something manipulative, maybe even something abusive between him and Sei, and for whatever reason, she could not get away from him. Whatever it may have been. I believe it's something like that. I believe he had some kind of blackmail on her. He's not an innocent person, but because of how talented she was, he wanted her around. And maybe he was more obsessed with her than just that. It's possible. Anyway, keep going. Fortunately, I didn't have any way of telling for sure, seeing as how Masaki was the only one who'd known her in life. However, I had to assume that was indeed the case, since I couldn't imagine her death had been anything but suicide.
自殺だとして、その現場は遺体が発見された自宅で間違いないのだろう。
That's a good question. That's a good question. You know what, Toji? You got me at a loss for words. I don't quite know how to answer that one. I'm gonna keep it a buck. That's curious. That's very curious. I believe she did. I believe her body, she died and was modified in that apartment. That's the thing, I just don't know if the evidence supports that. All our art supplies are there. What we know for sure is that the arms were severed there. Do we know? Man, I don't know. Highly likely this is an illusion murder case. There may be more in the future. Did she die in her apartment? Or was she moved there? Oh, I don't know what to decide on this one, honestly. I genuinely don't know what to decide. Because our evidence list doesn't tell me whether or not she died. Whether or not there was paint thinner. Whether or not she died. Whether or not there was paint thinner. I found chocolates in my room. Doesn't tell me whether or not there was paint thinner in the room. We know there was art restoration tools, so it's very possible. It's you. It's you. God, I'm just... If only there was something in my evidence list. It says art supplies, but all it shows here is like the little scraper, paintbrush, and some paints. We don't know whether or not there was paint thinner at the scene of the crime. Other than that, there was a pool of blood. Maybe she was killed in the apartment. Maybe she was. Okay. And maybe after killing her in the apartment, the killer then realized for the scene to be properly set, it was best if they were killed elsewhere, drained of blood elsewhere, before being propped up. Because clearly in the apartment, she wasn't drained of her blood beforehand. That's the thing. The last two victims, they've been drained of blood prior. There was no blood at the actual crime scene. The refuse and trash is swept away, but there's no blood on the ground. There is blood on the ground, I believe, if she was killed in her apartment.
だろうな。今のところ他の場所で死亡したという証拠は何もない。
そこへ犯人が訪れ、遺体を発見し、
Unless it was something they premeditated.
しかし問題がある。それができる人間というのが結局笹倉くらいしか浮かんでこない。
大学時代の同期を当たってみたが、卒業後に交流があった者はいないようだった。
まあ、会っていたとしても言えねえよな。
画廊で学生に絵を教えたりしていたらしい。その時の教え子が分かればいいのだが。
勘弁してくれ。
She did realize that'd make me look like a total creep, didn't she?
だがそれは学生だろ。前園聖が恨みを抱くような相手か。
そんなのは本人にしか分からないさ。しかし、絵を教わっていたのならば。
Is there anyone out there who meets those criteria? Setting aside why I say Maizona committed suicide for the time being, did you have any students who would have remodeled their own mentor's body after finding her? Definitely wouldn't put it past someone who'd grown obsessed with Exile of Paradise, that much was sure.
もしかすると、天罰盗難犯と同一かもしれないな。
Yes.
可能性はある。だが実際は。
どういうことだ
?3 人目の二川明美が失踪したのが23日で、絵が盗まれたのが翌24日だ。その日は遺体の加工を行っているはずで。
Timing just didn't work out no matter how you spun it.
遺体の加工がうまくいかず、絵を見に行ったという可能性。
遺体にそれまでとの差異はさほどない。頭蓋骨が割れているせいで試行錯誤の跡は見られるが。
お前は別人による犯行だと思うわけか。
勘ではな。絵を学んでいる学生であれば、上野でカンバスを持っていても怪しまれない。そういった点を考えれば可能性は高い。
可能性でしか論じられないな。
Toji shook her head again.
俺は元よりそのつもりだったがね。現時点で考えられる可能性を列挙し、新たな事実が判明すればその都度潰していくだけさ。
どこかに事件をきれいに解決する名探偵はいないかね。
Toji sighed sarcastically before turning away from me. No, we're cooking here. We're cooking here. Muskie visited Kichiki Hospital that afternoon. Today was his first therapy session in over a week. However, he didn't feel that gloomy this time around. Perhaps this is a sign that I'm getting better? Muskie strolled inside and checked in at the reception desk. There weren't too many other patients around, possibly because it was already past noon. As such, he encountered no one else on his way to the psych ward. Muskie took a seat on a bench outside the examination room and opened his notebook. He'd been keeping a diary as promised, albeit not a particularly detailed one. Most of his entries concerned what he investigated day after day, his cases, in other words. Neither had been going all that well. Reiji's case also seemed far from a resolution, though he had a suspect in Sasakura if nothing else.
まさきさん。
A nurse summoned Muskie just then.
失礼します。
Yes, yes!
いやあ、久しぶり。
Love this
とい
CG.
うほどでもないか。
Kaede got off her desk and strode toward Muskie.
元気そうだね。風邪などはひいていないか？
ええ、おかげさまで。
それはよかった。内科にまで通わせるのは面倒だからね。
Kaede laughed. Someone certainly is in a good mood today.
日記はつけているかい？
ええ、まあ、あまり書くこともありませんけれど。
それで構わないよ。しかし、日々が充実しているように思えるね。
そうなんでしょうか。
Muskie wasn't sure if he'd go so far as to say that, but he at least didn't feel like he was wasting his days in sloth anymore.
君の場合は心の虚無感に原因があるんだ。誰かいい人
No, not you two, Kaede. Come on, I like you. Don't try to pair Muskie up with Yukari. Don't be doing that.
そんなのいませんよ。
Muskie promptly shook his head.
そうか。君もいい年なのだから身を固めるのも悪くないと思うぞ。
先立つものがありませんから。
Hell, he didn't even have his own place yet.
白崎くんはどうだい？君に随分懐いているようじゃないか。
That's his daughter, you sick fuck.
ですね。いくつ離れていると思っているんですか。
では彼女の母親はどうだい？白崎くんを引き取り
Now see there,
女
you're
手一つで
cooking.
生きていこ
But
う
he's gonna be
なん
like,
て男なら守ってあげたいと思うんじゃないのか。
there's history there.
ですね。
Muskie kept his face as calm and flat as possible as he sighed with exasperation.
冗談だよ。
Kaede laughed. She had no idea about Muskie's personal history, of course. That was why she couldn't possibly realize just how especially awkward the latter prospect would be.
それはともかく最近は落ち着いているようだし通院してもらう必要もないかもしれない。
Honestly, Muskie had no idea if said sessions were actually doing him any good to begin with.
今度からは気が向いた時に来てもらえればいい。もっともすることといえば世間話程度だし。
Have you not been paying attention to the fact that I show up here every evening? You've talked to me on like 2 or 3 of those occasions in the last week. I'd hate for you to keep coming by. I'm like, ma'am, I come in here when I'm not scheduled to come in here.
いえ、
I
そんなこ
love
とは
you. Muskie shook his head.
これからも水曜日にお世話になります。
He thought he might stop showing up altogether if he decided otherwise.
君がそういうのであればそうしよう。
Kaede nodded and grinned like she read Muskie's mind perfectly. Take me. It was already evening by the time Muskie returned to the agency. Since he was doing better, he saw no reason to keep up the twilight patrols that had become his routine over the last several weeks. Back to the hospital! March starts tomorrow, so I'll make today my last one. Turn over a new leaf come the new month. It was with that thought in mind that Muskie decided to venture out onto the streets of Tokyo once more. We're going right back to the hospital! Let's go! Muskie returned to Kichiki Hospital. He'd literally just been told he didn't have to go there so much anymore. Yet he found himself drawn to this place without even so much as a conscious thought. It wasn't like he needed to see a doctor at the moment, of course. Muskie stepped inside. It's practically deserted, unsurprising since reception hours were over.
あら、まさきさん。
Kaharu!
どうも山之内先生。
Muskie bowed when he happened to cross Kahara.
先ほどまでこちらにおられたそうですが、
I'm just
何か
chilling.
忘れ物ですか？
いや、そういうわけではないんですが。
Even he didn't know why he'd returned. Because I told you to.
綿貫先生は
もう帰宅されましたよ。
そういうわけでも。
Now Kahara was starting to regard him oddly.
そうだ。白崎さんの様子は最近どうですか？
Muskie lunged for the first topic that came to mind.
白崎さんですか？最近は随分と落ち着いていま
Hell
すね。
yes.
発作を起こすこともありませんし。
She had to have been referring to Huyumi, not Yukiko.
どうしてあの人は白崎さんを引き取ることにしたんでしょうかね。
That was a mystery that had been boggling Muskie's mind over the last month or so. Right, he doesn't know that fact. Wait. Oh, I guess he knows that she's trying to adopt her, but he doesn't know that she's her actual biological mother. So when, when Watanuki sensei, says, oh, what about Shirasaki's mother? He just thinks like, oh, the woman trying to adopt her. He doesn't realize that's her biological mother. Okay, yeah.
もともと保育所を運営していますからね。白崎さんもそこで働くようになれば社会復帰にもなるでしょうし。
Is that really all there is to it, though? In the end, Muskie was still as much of a loss for an answer as before. Oh, Muskie. Maybe one day. Hopefully, I mean, this is the final entry in the series, so, like, hopefully by the end of this you realize. I parked my car far into the driveway. The house was alive with voices, meaning Yukari must have had company. Assuming she hadn't gone crazy and started talking to the radio anyway.
ただいま。
あら兄さん、
お邪魔してます。
You. Yukari and Chie were in the living room. There are empty plates on the table, indicating they'd probably just finished eating.
どうぞごゆっくり。
I had no intention of breaking up their little get-together. So I went to my room and removed my coat. Sat down on a floor cushion, stretched out as far as my arms would let me. Though I'd done some digging here and there after discussing the case with Toji, I ultimately had nothing to show from all of my efforts. Is confronting Sasakura the only choice we have left? It was all but certain that he knew more than he was letting on. The man may not necessarily have been the culprit, but he was definitely hiding something. As such, I felt approaching the case from that angle would be the best way to solve it. I just hoped that whatever he knew would shed some light on the culprit. All of a sudden, the door opened, revealing Yukari.
兄さん、少々よろしいですか？
なんだ？
これからちえちゃんが帰られるのですが。
Yukari struggled to say the rest. Glanced at the clock as she fumbled over her words. It was almost 8 p.m.
そうか。じゃあ送っていくよ。
すみません、ありがとうございます。
気にするな。
Couldn't let a girl my sister's age wander the streets all by herself, especially not when she was a serial killer on the loose currently hunting such women.
久保井さんの家はどこだい？
I went back to the living room and asked Chie as she rifled through a magazine.
世田谷なのです。共同駅の近くで。
Setagaya, close to Kyoto Station. Where's on the map? Setagaya, close to something station. I already forgot that. Setagaya. Here's Setagaya. Here's Chofu. And here's the Chofu station. So if she's in Setagaya down here, near Chofu, what's her exact line? It's close to Kyoto Station. Where's Kyoto? Is Kyoto a location or is it just the name of a station? Like Kichijoji, it's not in an area called Kichijoji, even though Chofu is in Chofu. Because the one woman was found somewhere in Chofu, but she was from Kunetachi. And I think the same with like the woman was from Huchu, which found in Chofu. They keep being found in Chofu. Meanwhile, Setagaya. I'm just saying. Now, for all we know, she could be like over here, right? At like this crossing or something. She's not too far. Maybe the station's here and she's not too far from that. I'm guessing if we follow this little line here. I'm guessing you're somewhere in this area. Chopu's somewhere over here. And honestly, if you look at it, well, they said they're moving around by car. They said they're getting around by car. There's the private railway. See, that's the thing. We don't see how the roads are working, but I don't know. There's a rail that leads directly through Setagaya, through Chofu, through Huchu, and you can switch off and get the Kuritachi. Very possible. Very possible. Setagaya. Setagaya. I'm on to you, Chie. I'm on to you.
じゃあなおさら車の方が楽だろうね。
After all, that wasn't too far from Chofu, the probable base of the killer's operations. Yeah, I wonder why.
よろしくお願いしますです。
Chie put down the magazine and
で
bowed.
はゆかり、準備できたら呼んでくれ。
はい、わかりました。
I went back to my room and donned my jacket. Fortunately, the car likely wouldn't need heating up since I'd just been driving it a few minutes earlier. The girls were gone by the time I got back, probably in Yukuri's room if I had to guess. So in the meantime, I flopped down onto the couch and picked up a magazine. It was that weekly periodical that Masuki had brought over the other day. Oh, is that the magazine that Chie was flipping through? Backlog. Chie, she rifled through a magazine. Chie was looking at the magazine. Oh, Chie was looking at the magazine. She knows. She knows that the public is aware. She knows. I never did give it more than a cursory glance, did I? Couldn't be linked to the disappearance of Exile Paradise, since and how it come out the day after the theft. However, the connection between the painting and the murders would undoubtedly be the talk of the whole town if a follow-up article came out. I just hoped I could solve the case before then. That was to say, before any copycat crimes started popping up. Yukari and Chie returned just then, both decked out in coats.
お待たせいたしました。
ゆかり。
ええ。
Knowing Yukari, she probably wanted to make sure Chie got home in person.
じゃ、行くか。
You're definitely not staying the night, though, Yukari. You better not ask me for that. You better not ask for no goddamn slumber party. Yukari got in the back of the car while Chie rode shotgun.
環状道路が早くできれば楽になるんだがね。
But for now, I'd have to settle for taking either Inokashira Street or Aome Street.
申し訳ありませんです。
君が謝ることではないさ。
If anything, I felt all but obliged to ensure she got home safe and sound. I knew I never could have lived with myself if I made her walk only for her to turn up as the next angel a few days later.
そういえば、
Yeah.
お兄さんは
So you're a
探偵さんなの
detective,
ですね。
are ya? Been onto any interesting cases recently?
まあ、そうだが。
I nodded as I stayed focused on the dark roads outside of the
そ
windshield.
れでは、前園先生をご存知なのですか？
Yukari screamed.
悪い。久保井さん。
前園先生は私の絵の先生だったのです。
Chie hung her head as she
お
answered.
兄さんは何か知ってらっしゃるのではないですか？
悪いけれど、そういうことは何も話さないよ。
I proceeded down the road, slowly and carefully. Damn, sure as hell wasn't expecting that. Well, it really is out to prove to me that it's a small place, isn't it?
さっきの雑誌に載っていたのです。あれは先生のこと
Now,
な
how
ので
would
す
you
よ
know
ね。
that? Now, how would you know that? You were never told how she was killed. Unless, did it give you dates? Does the magazine give you a date on when it happened? If so, then I suppose, but even still, how would you know that? You could have just played dumb. However, I wanted all the information I could get. Selfish, I know.
前園さんはどういう人だったのかな。
優しい人だったのです。一日中つきっきりで絵の描き方を教えてくださったのです。
Chie's hands balled into fists atop her lap.
いつから学んでいたんだい。
3年ほど前からなのです。美術学校へ行きたかった私が頼んで来てもらったのです。
では彼女が海外に出ていた時は。
突然の話でしたけど、先生が腕を磨いてこられるのなら。
ちえちゃんは今度留学するんですよ。今日はそのお祝いでした。
Yeah, you're about to go study abroad yourself, aren't you? About to flee the country, aren't you? Yukari volunteered some additional information once Chie finished. Thanks, Yukari. That helps.
ほう、どこへ行くんだい。
先生と同じ なのです。船旅になるので時間はかかりますけど。
I passed beneath the overpass, spanning the Chuo line just then. One side. I just want to make a. Well, no, there's no point in me googling that now. I was gonna say, what are Italy's extradition laws or extra? Yeah, I think that's the word I'm looking for. Extradition. Yeah, extradition. Yeah. I was gonna Google what Italy's extradition laws are, but right now it doesn't fucking matter because this takes place in the 50s. It doesn't matter what Italy's current extradition laws are. I'm gonna Google it anyway. Italy extradition laws. Governed by an international allow extradition for offenses punishable by at least 1 year of imprisonment or more in both requesting and requested states, but with exceptions for political offenses in case where there's a risk of inhumane treatment. Oh, I see. Usually it's done by treaty. Okay. So it varies country to country. But Italy and Japan, right? I'm just saying, this is post-war, and I'm pretty sure Italy and Japan were kind of in cahoots with each other during World War II, from what I remember. Unless there was some fallout I was not aware of. It's possible, it's possible. So it's not like, so from what I can tell, obviously I didn't do like a deep dive to like, in the 1950s, would it be possible to like I didn't get specific with my Google questioning, but from what I can tell, Italy and Japan's, like even in the wake of World War II after they lose, right, they're probably still allies in a sense, I'd imagine. So I assume they'd have some kind of extradition treaty between them should something happen. So I don't think she would be safe from anything if she went to Italy. Unless Italy was just a cover. Unless it's just a cover story. Possible. But I don't think she'd go so far with that kind of story. But maybe she thinks if she gets to Italy, she can just easily disappear, which is stupid. A Japanese girl disappearing into Italy? Come on now. The three of us spent the drive in silence for a little while after that. There were still loads I wanted to ask her. The same probably went for her. Thus I was left pondering how to bridge the gap. Right then, the headlights of a tram zoomed by.
君はどこまで知っているんだい?
I kept my eyes focused on the road.
先生が殺されてしまったらしいという。
So nothing more than what the press had reported then.
どうして？
Chie leaned forward in her seat. Now see, I do believe that she is genuinely shooken up about Sei's death. But not because she wasn't expecting it. She genuinely looked up to Sei, and she probably never wanted her to die, but because of Exile in Paradise coming out, that's why she stormed out of the art gallery, right? Not only because she then had to go talk with Sei, probably, but she realized what it would mean. She realized what would happen now that Exile of Paradise was publicly known. She probably knew it would lead to her death. So I do believe she's actually grief-stricken about the death of Sei Maizono, but I do still think she is the remodeler. I do believe that. And of course, she's smart enough to not leak that, you know, Sei would have killed herself. Like, she was murdered. I know she was murdered.
Chie-chan.
You could have instinctively reached out and held Chie back.
落ち着いているから大丈夫なのです。
Chie gingerly shook off Yukari's grip.
先生が何をしたというのでしょうか。
事件というものは不条理極まりないものばかりだよ。
ですが、
No, please continue your line of thought. Were you about to incriminate yourself in some capacity? By all means, finish your thought. Chie fell silent. It took a right onto Suido Road, an intersection in Koenji.
雑誌に載っていたのです。とてもひどい殺され方をした。
Article in question hadn't mentioned Sei Maizono's name, but apparently those in the know could easily put two and two together.
どうして
Chie was sobbing.
ちえちゃん
Yukari reached out again, this time giving Chie a pat on the shoulders.
大丈夫
Just then, we crossed over the railroad crossing adjacent to Sakura Josei Station.
もう少し先を
Chie feebly directed me. Checked the back mirror to find Yukari censuring me with a glare. Shit, I'm in for it now. This is gonna be one hell of an uncomfortable trip home. Took my right hand off the gear stick and ruffled Chie's hair.
必ず犯人は捕まえるから。
でも私その頃にはもう
きちんとお便りは出しますからご安心ください。
はいありがとうございます
Chie thanked Yukari as she wiped her tears.